Hello and welcome. In this episode, we are going to be diving into the lexicology of the word elegy, which carries with it not only the heavy weight of emotion, but also a deep history dating back millennia to the epic and, more specifically not epic, poems of ancient Greece. But more on that a little bit later. Elegy as a concept is an incredibly nuanced form of expression, so although this episode will be taking a close look at what an elegy is, in order to truly understand elegy, it is also just as important that we discuss what it is not. At first glance, it can be easy to conflate an elegy with a eulogy, but there are some fundamental differences between these two pieces of writing. To begin, an elegy, classically, is written as a kind of poetry, specifically in the form of elegiac couplets, which we will touch on in more detail later. By contrast, eulogies are written in common prose, more similar to an essay than a poem. But there is a subtle difference in the content of each that better explains the variation between the two. Elegy ultimately can be traced back to the ancient Greek Elegia, often used in conjunction with the word ode, to convey the idea of an elegiac song, as elegies are originally derived from songs of lament. Conversely, eulogy, though a similar sounding word, has a completely separate etymology, being derived from the Latin eulogia, which traces its origins back to the Greek eu, meaning well, and logia, which means speaking or to speak. And this morpheme comes from logos, representing words or discourse. From this, we can see that the direct meaning of eulogy is to speak well of someone or to praise someone. So, technically speaking, eulogies do not necessarily need to refer to the dead, but that is just how the term is most commonly used in modern society. Another word commonly associated with elegy would be epitaph, and to be fair, there is a bit of overlap between these two ideas. An epitaph is a phrase, brief poem, or commemorative prose written for a person who is deceased. It ultimately derives from the Greek epitaphion, a word used to describe something over a tomb, from epi, over, and taphos, tomb. This word is most commonly used specifically to describe an inscription etched onto a headstone. Obviously, this concept is ambiguous enough that a shorter elegy could suffice as an inscription, and therefore be used as an epitaph, and it is actually quite common to do so. However, it is important to note that although the two terms are not mutually exclusive, they are not synonymous with each other, and such a difference should not be overlooked. Historically, elegies have quite strong ties to music, even more so than other contemporary forms of poetry, which hints at the possible history of this type of composition. However, the origins of elegy are currently unclear. There is a theory that there may be a possible connection between elegies and the concept of lamentations, which in this context would be a poem or a song expressing sorrow and grief, usually over a death or some other tragedy, but this connection is considered to be non-canonical at this time. Although it is easy to see how elegies would have evolved from lamentations, the two compositions serve a similar function, considering that they are both performative ways to express despair. But they each offer a different approach to conveying their message. Lamentations in this context typically have a structure of call and response, known as antiphonal singing, meaning that there are multiple singers or choirs participating. In the instance of lamentation, there would be a lead singer, typically the person who is most affected by the death or tragedy, and an ensemble choir from the afflicted community singing the responses back. Conversely, elegies are typically performed by one person, although this isn't always the case. Additionally, they were not exclusively used to express sorrow, even though this was their principal purpose. They were also occasionally written to capture feelings of love, admiration, and bravery. Furthermore, elegies, in a classical sense, have a very distinctive meter which distinguishes them from certain other poetry formats. But it should be noted that the meter we are discussing is not exclusive to elegies. Elegy uses a combination of alternating hexameter and pentameter lines, offering an uneven but melodic quality. This means that the lines would either have 6 feet or 5 feet, respectively. A foot, in this context, is used to dictate the rhythm of the poem, and usually the syllables of the line work around this rhythm, which can require an altering of inflection on certain words, or even elisions, which are the omission of letters or syllables of a word, in order to fit the rhythm dictated by the rhyming scheme. Elegiac writing, in a technical sense, consists of a line of dactylic hexameter, followed by a line of dactylic pentameter. A dactyl is a foot consisting of 3 syllables, where the first syllable is stressed and the second 2 are unstressed, so that the emphasis would be on the first syllable regardless of the normal inflection of a word in common speech. In case such structured poetry does not fall within your area of expertise, as it does not mine, an easy way to remember that dactyl is indicative of 3 syllables is that the etymology of the word comes from the Greek dactylos, meaning finger, which is in reference to the 3 joints of a finger, 1 long and 2 shorter. In addition to being structured with dactyls, Elegiac couplets allow for the option of another format for a foot, known as the spondee, where a foot will consist of 2 stressed syllables as opposed to the 1 stressed and 2 unstressed layout of the dactyls. In this form, the second long or stressed syllable functions as a contraction of the 2 shorter unstressed syllables featured in the classic dactyl. However, although spondee can be substituted for dactyls, it should be noted that elegiac couplets are primarily formatted with the latter. To dive further into the structure, we can take a closer look at the layout of the individual lines that comprise an elegiac couplet. As mentioned, the couplets consist of a line of dactylic hexameter, followed by a line of dactylic pentameter, and this pattern alternates throughout the whole poem, but there are certain idiosyncrasies in each. The lines of hexameter are commonly structured in a way that the first 5 feet of the line can either be dactylic or spondee. However, the final foot is what is known as an incomplete dactyl, which indicates that the foot consists of 1 stressed syllable and 1 unstressed syllable, instead of the usual 2 unstressed syllables. The pentameter, on the other hand, is structured quite uniquely, where the first 2 and last 2 feet are interchangeably dactyls or spondee, but the 5th foot is actually broken up into 2 separate pieces, one in between the 2nd and 3rd foot, and one after the 4th full foot. This split foot is often represented by a stressed syllable in each half of the foot. Another interesting feature of alternating between hexameter and pentameter is, due to the nature of the foot count, the hexameter lines are broken up asymmetrically. In this case, the line breaks in the middle of the 3rd foot, splitting it into a stressed syllable and 2 unstressed syllables. However, the rhythm of the pentameter is split symmetrically in the center, meaning the meter of the second half mirrors that of the first. This use of the symmetrical pentameter, coupled with the hexameter, is what separates elegiac poetry from the well-known epic poetry, such as the Odyssey or the Iliad, which adhere exclusively to the 6-foot lines of the hexameter. A further distinction between the 2 forms of poetry is that epic poems tend to speak more of a culture or group of people, whereas elegies are decidedly individualized and focus more on the personal struggles of whoever is writing it. That being said, in the modern interpretation, the concept of an elegy isn't so structured. Now it is thought of more as a poem or a song, that is infused with melancholy, regardless of its source, whether it be metaphysical, personal, internal, external, heartache, death, whatever may be pulling the composer into that frame of mind. It is difficult to speak more in detail on the matter because there are so few rules in place for the art of elegy in modern writing. Elegies are subjective and personal and oddly frivolous, as they tend to serve the writer more than anyone else. They are reverence and catharsis and blood. Probably one of the most notable modern elegies would be the famous "O Captain, My Captain," written by American poet Walt Whitman, which both exalts and mourns Abraham Lincoln upon his assassination. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wrack, the prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh the bleeding drops of red, where the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. But there are an infinite number of elegies to explore across time and place. We hum along to them without thinking, recite them in our heads, craft them, if only for ourselves. Thank you so much for listening all the way through if you did. Please leave a like if you would like to hear more episodes. Also feel free to leave a comment if there are any other words you would like to see covered in the future.